I'd like to call the Reinvest Subcommittee of the Executive Committee of the Kankakee County Board to order. If we can get a roll call, please.
Mr. Wheeler?
Present.
Mr. Carrico?
Present.
Ms. Bryan?
Present.
Mr. Collins?
Present.
Mr. Lear?
Present.
Mr. Hunter?
Present.
Mr. Dennell? We have a quorum.
Thank you. We have, let me explain something first. We have public comment and then we have public input. They were both on every committee agenda. The reason there's two on there is because public comment is timed out at 15 minutes. And so if we had a bunch of public comments that were public inputs, we'd have to keep voting to allow to extend it. So it seemed more functional to have a public comment where it's people that just want to comment, well, really about anything. You can't say, but hopefully it will be about the process or something to do with this. They'd like to see, you know, us do whatever. But then the public input is where people come in and tell us, well, I think you should address this if you're reinvesting in Kankakee County, because it's all relevant. And the list that we get on public input is going to be, Kelly's keeping it. And so unless it's a non-allowed use of the ARPA money, then it will stay on the list, because at some point the county board will be prioritizing these lists, both in a policy after we vet it through policy, which is what we'll talk about later, but then also when this committee will flip over and be the finance committee for reinvestment, then everything will be prioritized on the committee level, send that up to the finance committee, and then they'll take everything and put it together and prioritize from there. So it has, at some point there'll be, like I said, a red line across there, and that's where we're out of money. And then 2 years from now, or a year from now, there could be a great idea that nobody ever considered, or pandemic comes back, or whatever happens. There's built-in flexibility to reprioritize down the road. So I just want to mention that's the process. We want to hear from the public and their ideas, but the subject matter experts that we will call in based on the projects will help guide us through that. So if it's we say we need to reinvest in something out of this committee, well, then we bring in subject matter experts to talk about that a little bit, because we're all not versed in everything. So is there an initial question? Mr. Collins, do you have something? I'm sorry, I thought I saw a hand go up. Steve, was that you? I'm sorry.
I had a question. We talked about different proposals, and let me just say this again without being redundant. Chairman had a meeting with some stakeholders back in March.
St. Patty's Day.
Yeah. That's March, I think. Right, Kelly? Yeah. Anyway, with NAACP, Hispanic Partnership, a lot of churches and other individuals, aldermen, and so forth. Mike, and we talked about the evolution of the guidelines, et cetera, because it seems like every week the chairman was saying, here's some more guidelines, and explaining this and that, and things were in a state of flux in terms of what you could do, what you couldn't do. But my question is that, and I had mentioned to the county board members, I don't want to see 1 million requests come in. I want to see an investment in bees or something. I don't want to see something like that, but yeah. But I know individuals who are putting together and have put together proposals. Now, will you how will you prioritize or select the people who want to make a presentation? Because I know some people who are really viable stakeholders who would be able to convey their proposal in a pragmatic way.
Sure. Let me answer that question in just a second, because it's part of what we're going to talk about.
Okay.
But it's absolutely essential. That's one of the reasons for this meeting. So let's get through public comment, public input first, and then we'll start going into that. So absolutely. This first, the one and only Bill Barnes is here. He wants to talk about surveillance cameras, as far as the infrastructure / reinvestment. So go ahead, Bill.
Right, thanks, and thanks for allowing me the time again. So not to bore Andy and Kelly with things, but I was here earlier at various meetings to talk about. So my name is Bill Barnes. So I'm a resident of Kankakee County all my life. I have lived for the past year in Manteno. Prior to that, for 5.5 years, I lived on Cobb at Poplar. So I'm very familiar with the community, and just because I live in Manteno doesn't mean I don't care about the city of Kankakee, because it is the hub of really what goes on in Kankakee County and sets a precedence for everything else, I think. About 6 weeks ago, actually about 2 months ago, I met with Mayor Curtis, and I work with Midwest Integrated Solutions, which is a security systems business based in Bradley. It's been there for like 30 years, owned by Steve Wilder and Chris Sorensen. So, so we gave a presentation to Mayor Curtis about what we see as really a well, I guess it would get into, well, sorry, I'm lost for my thought there. I lost my train of thought. But I presented a surveillance cameras throughout the city of Kankakee to reduce crime, to increase arrest and also prosecution, because it has facial recognition and it has license plate recognition, and can be very technical. So in the proposal, just so we have an idea, since we're talking infrastructure, the proposal, and this would include body cameras for police officers, also surveillance with a third party that works with the police department, from $3.5 to $4 million ballpark, part of the budget. So that's what I proposed, and I was here earlier to talk about it because it really encompasses obviously public safety, the court system, you know, because as we know, unfortunately there have been a lot of shootings. There have been averaging 1 murder a month, I think, right now on average in the city of Kankakee. A lot of times, obviously, people are afraid not to say anything. Whereas if you have surveillance cameras, you have it on video, that really does the work for you. And I mean, let's face it, until something is done with crime, whether it's here, Chicago, New York, I just saw a video of in New York City, somebody was gunned down, and caught on surveillance camera. So obviously something that somebody couldn't identify and probably wouldn't. So that's my 2 cents, I guess, or maybe
Thank you.
3. All right,
Yep.
thanks.
So the process is that we take like what Bill is talking about in a general sense, and it would be, video cameras with recognition to address crime and basically those areas that need it. So whether it's, we're not going to put a label on it, Kankakee, whatever, but it also demonstrates that there are opportunities for community partnerships for people that think it impacts you and the municipality, you being county, municipality. We're looking for those partnerships because it makes sense for everybody to share those resources, or to pool them, if you will, so all of our money goes further and has a larger impact. So those are one of the things that I thought I would mention as we were associated with this. So we have no minutes to approve, but I wanted to get into a little bit of the committee mission and the process, because really this is completely new, as I've said in all the other meetings. It's this is, nobody's really dealt with something like this before that I can think of. On the state level, maybe the tobacco money, but that didn't even get down to local decisions. It was made for us what we were doing for that. So it's a very unique, welcomed opportunity, but it's also dangerous. As far as something will pass muster that something else won't. And so one day somebody's happy and the next day they're upset because you didn't fund this other project they want. But that's just what's going to come with this, because they're giving you the money and they say you figure out how to spend it under these guidelines. So that's where I think we have the obligation, and that's why I've asked to set it up this way, to have these subject matter experts in here to help us. We have ideas. So how does this impact what currently is going on, what happened before COVID, during COVID, and then blue sky? How could all this work better if we did X, Y, and Z? And then maybe we hear the same thing coming from other municipalities or other counties, as Workforce found out in the last last meeting we had. So counties, I didn't really consider counties pooling money, but on a workforce side of things, if we have the Grundy, Livingston, Kankakee Workforce Board, and they're getting grants for job training and skills, well, maybe we could target each county for the jobs that are open. They manage it, and we get involved and help fund it on, but 3 counties do that. Does that make sense? Because then we know that we have open jobs and we have a skills gap. How do we address that? So in this side of things, we're just looking through the reinvestment side of things, those larger capital projects that, not capital, they could be, you know, other projects that are kind of connect all these different communities. This is a really interesting type committee that we might be able to do a lot of good work in, things that we wished could have been connected over the years. And so we won't get into that right now because today's discussion is policy. But sooner or later, and it'll be sooner, we'll get into like, what do people think we need to do to connect all the dots in the community? What should the county reinvest in that's not being under workforce? It's not specifically under business. It's not under the courts. It's not under any of those other things. Maybe it's what's connected to all of those. How could the county get involved to help have the biggest impact on those things that are both costly in terms of human capital, but also, you know, monetary capital as taxpayer resources. So this committee is going to be interesting. And there might not be any big decisions that come out of here for a while, because we may wait to see what workforce has done and how they're connecting to other counties or business committees. What are they finding? You know, the workforce development, it may, you know, I'll use an example. You know, how do we get people that are underemployed, unemployed, are incarcerated, substance abuse, mental health issues? How do we get them into that continuum of, whether it's treatment, you know, anti-recidivism, you know, the skills to be able to get that foot in the door and then that next level to make it their career. You know, transportation's involved in that because most of the time people don't have transportation to get to that foot in the door job, and that's why they are in that cycle of they're there for 2 weeks and then all of a sudden Uncle Bill can't take me because his car broke down, and then they don't have a job anymore. Well, I mean, those are things that we can really look at that didn't exist before. Things in this committee like, oh geez, what's another one? Oh, well, here's reality. Like when somebody's having a mental health episode and they bring it to the hospital and they're not admittable, the police normally are doing that, but then they haven't committed a crime that would have them go to jail. Well, where do they go? Well, they just open the door. They just let them out. Maybe there needs to be a place for people to go 24 hours a day if that situation happens, because guess what? They're reoffending, they're self-medicating. You see, I mean, it connects. And if, you know, there's so much we could do here if we look for partners in this area, and I think this committee may manifest in those partnerships. And I just know about it tangentially because I've never worked in the industry. I've been on those boards and from the mental health side of things, so I see where the disconnects are there. In Illinois, it's funding. That's the biggest problem in Illinois. We're the worst state in the United States as far as mental health funding. I would venture to say we're probably about the same in substance abuse. You know, we don't even have an adult treatment facility, I don't think, in the county anymore. I'm not sure of that, but I think that, definitely not for children. I don't think we have, you know, under 18, I don't think we have any substance abuse for kids in the county inpatient. Do we? I don't think that exists. So, Mr. Hunter?
Yeah, let me just piggyback on and confirm what you just indicated. You know, I worked for the Illinois Department of Human Services, which incorporated mental health services as well, too. But just think in terms of a 35-mile radius of Kankakee. Mm-hmm. Manteno Mental Health Center closed in 1985. You take a look at the facility on 102 was closed down. The prison, which, you know, provided some services out in Dwight, and yeah, that's true. And my board member here and then we're just talking about what happens when somebody's arrested and they release them. I mean, what kind of facilities do we have to address that? And not too long ago, you and I and some other stakeholders went over to the living room on South Schuyler. That's an entity, but what about a facility for treatment?
or they're going through a perfect example, what we were talking about at the living room, but they're not open at 2 in the morning.
Right.
A lot of this has happened at 2 in the morning. The bar closes, and then all of a sudden something happens, and I mean, we've seen it. I might have been in a bar at 2 in the morning once or twice in my life. Yeah,
Twice,
Jake,
twice.
we've heard things, but yeah, so it's just one of those things where it exists. Well, how do you tackle that? How do you work it into a continuum of, wow, we can't give this person the get off the opioids medication while they're incarcerated because there's no doctor outside to continue that prescription. So ethically, the doctors can't prescribe it. So we're just opening the door back up to addiction as soon as they get out. So what does that continuum look like within Kankakee County of, well, maybe they need to be in a halfway situation where workforce training is in there while they're on the meds to get off the opioids. I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there. Blue sky stuff. And just wait, Bill. I'm sorry. Yeah. Well, plenty of time. And by the way, I'm sure you'll be back the whole day the next time we meet. No, I'm just kidding. But no, that's what we're looking for. If there's ideas from people, bring them in. Because in a formal process, we need to talk about this, whether it's with the hospitals, the health department, the non-for-profits. We can do better. And what does blue sky look like going forward? The other thing I want to make sure of is that we get through this document, this KCR3 document that the board members have, and there's a few sitting in the back. This is a launch document. It's the Respond, Revitalize, Reinvest. It's a brand, if you will, that allows us to be able to focus in on that. But it really relates to what the law says we're supposed to be doing with the money and can do with the money. So that's why the committees are named a Respond Committee or a Revitalize Workforce, Revitalize Business, because that's what we're supposed to be doing with the money, and then reinvest in our community or the infrastructure within our community. So it is a targeted deployment of American Rescue Plan Act funding here in the county. I wanted to thank Kelly Bilak and Jasmine Humble, Anita Speckman, Steve McCarty, who all had different parts of this to basically formulate the data. We tried to make it like, well, what happened the last year and a half with COVID in terms of the numbers, and whether it's workforce or health or deaths or, by as many segments as we could, like, this is what we had. So this is the situation we're in right now. Then also to be able to provide, focus for these committees on how are we going to tackle this, eat this elephant one bite at a time, as they say. We had to have a document and an overarching set of principles, i.e. the policies that we'll talk about in a little while, that'll help basically provide that base for us to be able to build other more specific policies out of this committee and the other committees that allow us to develop whether it's our initiatives that we want to send out as NOFOs, or we're the grantor and there's grantees in the community to execute, which is probably the best way to go about this. We become the grantor, so we hold people who provide those services accountable, because guess what? We're accountable to the feds every quarter to provide the backup on where the money's gone. And if it has to be paid back, we're the ones who have to pay it back. So it makes sense that we are asking for a grant narrative based on, just like we do now. What's the grant opportunity? There's grants out there for X, Y, and Z. Well, the county's maybe looking for this, X, Y, and Z. And here's the deliverables we want, and this is the type of metrics we want. Because guess what? We're not going to be here in 3 years to pay for it. So it has to have sustainability tied to it as well. It just can't be throw money at something for 3 years and see if it works. There has to be, okay, what's the data that says people aren't coming back to jail because they got jobs and they got off of X, Y, and Z, or whatever we think that needs to be as far as reinvestment in the infrastructure or those connections within the county. So I'll read the mission statement. It's not all encompassing, it's just a starting point. The Kankakee County Respond, Revitalize, and Reinvest funds will be allocated, and by the way, page 3 is where I'm at in the booklet, for qualified businesses, not-for-profit entities, projects, or direct to individuals based on ARPA rules, location, need, impact, and equity. Those are just touch points. It could be, and the next kind of elaborates on that. I'll just say this first. Considering municipalities receive their own allocations, The county will focus on the rural areas of the county infrastructure, and areas within the county lacking the resources and/or infrastructure to mitigate the current and potential future pathogen emergency-related issues. This is like tied directly towards the law and what we can spend the money on. The overarching principles that will guide the process and deployment of funds will consider the following, and there is an asterisk there to say additional policies may be adopted during the process by vote of this committee if it deals with reinvestment, or other committees. They may say we need to have a new policy that says we have to address this, and that's okay because we need to have built-in flexibility. This is all new. We can't be expected to know everything right up on the front end, but it just has to be a solid process. So the first thing, and again, this is just the groundwork. This is not specificity, but the first thing is, as practicable, deploy 2 years of ARPA funds on initiatives that have a long-term 10 to 20-year impact. Where applicable, utilize special internal funds before ARPA funds. That means funds that we've collected as fees within our service continuum, that should be used first because that's what we've collected them for by law. Then if there's a shortcoming for a project, maybe then that's why this is in here, because we can't just squirrel away money. That would be disingenuous. Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, let me ask you something, and I don't want to get into semantics, but looking at the mission statement, I'd like to pose this question to you and Ms. Humble, where it says allocated for a qualified business, blah, 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 impact and equity. Do you perceive equity as the same thing as diversity or not?
In that realm, that's where I was shooting for. We want to make sure that we actually are looking at this as the impact of lack of infrastructure and the impact of on COVID in different it was manifested different in different communities. So we want to make sure we keep an eye on that. Should we focus on bringing more infrastructure into an area that already has a bunch of infrastructure? Or should we focus on equitable distribution of infrastructure money if that's where we're going? An example, broadband. Yes, we know we have a problem with broadband in Hopkins Park. Kids had trouble with school when they're at home. They had to buy the hotspots. It wasn't always the best solution. Well, guess what? They got the same problem in Herscher, in Altorf, in Essex. So, but equity is a big part of that, what drives this whole situation. I just got a study from the Farm Bureau that productivity, if you have broadband across the rural area of the county, productivity goes up 7 to 8, I think it was 7 to 9% is the study, because they're able to geo-position their fields. And they're able to look at, because they get more production out of their land.
Yeah, the farmers,
The new technology for farmers. The technology for farmers is unbelievable when it comes to internet access and the way that they're able
amazing.
to. I mean, you essentially just sit in your cab and let the plow do the work.
It drives you.
It's I mean, I talked with a lot of local farmers, and I work with a lot of local farmers that have talked about the increased productivity of their fields just from being able to plug their land into a GPS coordinated situation, and they just increase their productivity so much. And not to mention just making their job so much easier.
So that has an impact on both the eastern side of the county with the farming, but also the other side of the county too, and increases the GDP of the county. So again, I'm not saying we're going to make that decision, but we should really talk about that.
So equity in your perspective is macro, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it is, and we definitely need to make sure that there's communities that have been underserved by lack of infrastructure, because that's really what our money could have the best use for in that term. How can we invest in something that would have that 20-year impact? We could throw money at projects all day, but again, after 3 years, that money's gone. What are we doing to address how we could better our community in the long run?
And that's what I wanted to hear you say. Now, you said you heard a presentation from the Farm Bureau. I mean, agriculture in this county is one of the main employers when you think about it. And I think it'll be a learning process for all of us as well too. I never really thought about that until you just articulated that, and it makes sense. I mean, it's measurable, it's practical, it's pragmatic. and it's germane to a lot of different entities in terms of employment and productivity and all that stuff. So, yeah, and that's what I'm talking about in terms of presentations, stuff like that, which would be a priority.
Yeah, and I foresee, and Mary Posing is here from KCC, Dean of Workforce Services. See, I got it right this time. Thank you. Sorry, forgiveness. Only if I got it right. There would be no forgiveness. I messed it up. But no, if Mary's over here on the right, she's part of the workforce.
Where is she? I'm looking.
In the red. Yeah.
Oh, I couldn't see. Okay.
But again, there may be something that starts over in workforce that comes over to here because it was identified as a macro project that has impact across more lines. I don't want to put a dollar figure on that because then all of a sudden we start thinking, oh, anything over 500 grand has to go to this other committee, like we're some super committee that blesses everything else. But there may be things that move from one to the other that require larger investment decisions. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's why this exists, because, and again, and maybe not again, but I've said this in other meetings, we may meet and come up with policies and things that we want to work on, and we get to a certain point, and then we say, okay, well, we've done our work for now. We want to wait until things come in from other committees. So we may, you know, kind of take a break for a little while we're waiting, or while other data is being put together, or other things that the committee wants us to work on. So the expectation is this committee is looking at, I don't want to say more bigger picture stuff that could require a lot of background work that you send, you know, release the hounds, and I'm out, you know, talking to health department and hospitals and workforce and saying, what, you know, maybe you have a subcommittee that just meets with those folks and starts talking about some of this stuff.
And Mr. Chairman, thank you. Now, you're going to be attending the county conference end of this month or sometime soon, or?
Yeah, it's like in a week and a half, I think.
Do you think this subject matter will be discussed? I would think so.
I'm sure. This is I'm not doing the golf outing thing because I can get frustrated doing other things besides golf, but present company excluded John. Sorry. John's a golfer back there, but I will spend that time working with the chair people of the other counties and the board members to see what they're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not just a place to go eat and golf. It's a place where I'm actually, that's why I'm going. I usually don't have time for these types of things. And Steve obviously has a lot of time. He reports back to the board from UCCI on what they're doing. This time, I'm going to go because I want to hear it straight from people what's going on. And I'll be missing the executive committee meeting of this month to go. So it's that important.
But I'm sure you'll bring back stuff.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You know what? If you let me, I might Zoom from there. You guys vote to let me Zoom from there? Because it is official county business.
Yeah, but,
so.
but you'll be making all kinds of contacts and questioning folks as opposed to Zoom.
I'm finding people calling us. I'm just telling you, I'm getting calls from other counties like about, what are you doing? How did you set up and segregate your funds? You know, that kind of stuff. Because they know, they heard about what we did before with the cures money and how we became the example of how the rest of the state documented their use of the cures money. Yeah, well, we got a pretty good finance department along those lines, so it was buttoned up. So that was on my list. Steve said, make sure you talk about how good we are. Check. No, I'm just kidding. So let me get through the rest of this list here. So I think I said internal. Did I talk about internal funds? The fines, the fees collected, we use those first. The second item, okay. Access grant funds instead of ARPA funds when possible. There is so much more money in grant funds out there than there is in what we got or anybody else got. Unfortunately, they haven't released all that yet. As Mary mentioned in the last meeting, usually it's like, it's Christmas morning, unwrap your present, you got 30 days to send it in. And so we may have to do work on the front end as quickly as we possibly can to identify the types of projects that we want to go after. And there may be connections to workforce, training, economic development, business retention, courts, all of that. So it's not easy to roll like this because we're just starting out in an area that is really unfamiliar to boards right now, which is this like blue sky. What usually we're trying to deal with funding issues and things like that, and then create blue sky on the outside of that. Well, this is a little bit different. So that's one thing, the grants, and frankly, we're going to probably require it, and that's what I would ask of the board. Like, did you even, I know there's grants for certain business segments out there. Show me the rejection letter. That's kind of what I'm suggesting, or show me where you applied and you weren't eligible. Or, you know, because should we as a board be giving money to either businesses or other projects where there was another funding source and you didn't even try? So if you didn't know, you should have known. You know, I mean, I'm not trying to be heartless, but did you even try, or we're just the latest thing to come down? And I know a guy who's friends with somebody whose cousin's uncle's on the board. You know, I mean, that's not the way we're going to go about this business at all. So identify and support communities that were ineligible to participate in CURES, PPP, CARES programs. So again, there's ones that fell through the cracks. There was people that could not, the way they filed their taxes, they weren't eligible for some of this stuff.
Hey, Steve, park
sorry?
districts don't get money, do
Members
they?
of the gig economy,
That's what I think.
What's his name from Urban Park District?
What, as far as
Meetings today.
they missed out on money because of their way they filed their taxes.
the way they filed their taxes, yeah. So they'd have to substantiate to us that there was a loss from and we may say we need tax returns for X years, this year, that year, so we can judge it, you know. But again, that's a lot of work we have to do that we didn't have to do before. And so we're trying not to build a massive bureaucracy within the county. We may look at partnering with other people to actually help us, I want to say vet those, but there's some stuff we're just going to have to do ourselves, you know. So more to come on that, because we're trying to feel our way through that. But if we are a grantor, we are going to require of our grantees, and hopefully there's probably the best way to do is to have one grantee and then they have sub-grantees under them, so they're accountable to provide us the documentation for the programs that we're wanting to put out there. If you don't do it that way, then we're chasing down all the documentation, and there's no way that we'd be able to keep up with that with the staff that we have. Again, the money's gone in 3 years. We can't have this bureaucracy set up that frankly now has an expectation of employment after that point, because there won't be anything there to pay for it. So so again, unable to participate, and then build a consensus for regional projects. This is big for this committee. Solicit public involvement and deliver the same exceptional transparency exemplified by all other Kankakee County administration processes. Municipalities or governmental units over 400,000, I believe, have to do website and monthly reporting to their taxpayers and the government. We're just required quarterly to put in usage reports, and if they deem it all okay, no problem. If they say, well, this isn't a proper use of the money, then you got to pay it back. And that's another reason that we have to set up the right grantor-grantee system, because if it has to get paid back, that's us. And that's local taxpayer money that would have to be used to pay back that to the federal government. And that's just not going to happen as far as I'm concerned. It can't. So we have to make sure that we set up the systems in place with a grantor-grantee relationship that holds people accountable to those types of metrics that we are accountable for, and the results that we want to see out of these initiatives or programs. It just can't be open-ended to say we want to do X, Y, and Z, but have no measurables at the end of that to see, did it work? Do we want to try to fund this after this is over with? Hopefully that's the case. Excuse me. We come up with something that's actually good. So that's the first part of this. So is there any questions? I want to make sure that we understand. We're doing policy to start with. This is the first set of overarching policies, foundational, if you will. That's probably a better way to put it, to build off of, so we can start to get into the projects and the things that we think about. This committee is going to be cool because we're talking blue sky a lot, the what if stuff. And then we start to look for partners in that and see if it makes economic sense and then impact sense. So there's less about, you know, the other nuts and bolts that are relevant to this committee, but it will be nonetheless probably one of the more interesting ones, because we're able to dream in here and hopefully feel secure in doing so in live streamed and recorded meetings, that, you know, we're going to take every idea from the public and put it on there. We're going to have any idea that you guys have, and we're going to put it on there and see if that's something we can pursue further and say, yeah, that's something I think we should look at. And then talk to subject matter experts out there to say, well, is this a proper use of our resources? Will this move the needle on issue X? So,
Money too.
but we go through it. There's also in here, there's some information in here about how we segregate the money, keep it separate from all the other money, and so there's no commingling of funds. So there's no unreal expectations of budgets going forward after this is done. We don't want a big false budget in certain departments and then they go, you know, because then all of a sudden it becomes the expectation that that'll always be there. The subcommittees, I put in there a few articles from Brookings Institute that have helped. I found a particular help for me to help formulate some of these processes and really to validate what I was thinking already, that we've got to look for partners in this to maximize this. And if we don't, that's fine. I mean, it's not fine. It's a huge mistake and lost opportunity, but we'll still move forward on stuff that impacts the county and really has a long-term impact for the citizens, workforce, businesses, everything, taxpayers. You know, a good example would be this. Currently under our courts, there's the idea of you know, renovating the basement, which we got $400,000 from the governor on that, and it's going to cost us about another $250 or $300, but it's for jury assembly, and then also we have ADA issues in some of our offices in the courthouse. So at some point we are going to have to pay to address those. That's not going to go away. That law will not change. So would you think you would want to spend the money to fix the ADA issues in the courthouse that remain after all the other things we've done, which are in the offices? You know, people with disabilities have serious issue working in some of those offices. Do we spend it now or spend it later when we don't have the money? We're going to have to address that in either the courts committee or here, because that is our responsibility to the taxpayers. Are we going to ask them to pay for it later when we don't have the money via a referendum, which probably has zero chance of passing, or do we actually address it while we have the money? I'm just saying, we have to look at this stuff logically, intelligently for the next 10, 15 years in order to reduce that burden on our taxpayers. So with that, questions about the foundational, or any questions about any of this stuff? I got lots of questions because I don't know how this is going to play out, but go ahead.
I know that we've put out to the Daily Journal. I spend lots of time on Facebook, and I see that the Daily Journal put out the article that we were looking for input from the community. It's something that we're really striving to find, and is there a way that we could maybe ourselves, we have a county board Facebook page. I think that Mr. Wheeler is an excellent person when it comes to not dumbing things down, but putting things in layman's terms to people. Could we start making more forward Facebook posts on our actual page as opposed to just posting links to the meetings so that people can watch these meetings? I don't know if anybody pays attention, but usually we have around 8 to 15 people that watch these meetings. Mm-hmm. Could we start making Facebook posts and reach out as a chairman and say, hey, I want your input? There's a lot of people that have very valid concerns that I hear from, but a lot of their valid concerns come out of a place of ignorance where they don't understand the process and they don't understand the good-natured things that the board tries to accomplish. And I think we really do a disservice to ourselves by not stepping in and being more of a vocal presence online to make posts to invite people in rather than just say watch the meetings. Mm-hmm. So I was wondering if there's a way going forward that we could focus on just being more personable to people in the way that people choose to find their news, which tends to be on the internet. Just more personable posts is something that I'd like to see going forward.
Have you met Jasmine?
Briefly, yeah.
That's part of why she is here, to assist, well, really almost drive that in this realm, mm-hmm. and then later in others. As we start to shift towards, 90% occupied here as we shift over the years towards the other. But yeah, to your point, you know, we're going to make sure that we're more direct on, we're putting out the press releases with those solicitations for people to get involved and be on these committees. But the use of video is been addressed and is in production. I would like board members, as you know, like here's a good example. The chairs of this committee and other committees will report to the executive committee on what was passed or what's going on in their committees. I also think it's a good idea if we have video of key parts of that, of each committee, of things that are going on that are of import to the public, and then say, would you like to be part of this? Almost like a commercial. It's a way to use, like you said, the communications model, where to engage people on where they're at.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, people look to Facebook for news, and a lot of times it's not news, it's just somebody's version of what they're trying to get people to believe. And we've seen that all over the place. You know, even traditional newspapers do that, and other outlets do that as well. So I will say that while, you know, everything we're doing and saying is open to the world here, that's why it's like, watch the video. But to your point, nobody wants to sit there for 2 hours waiting for their 5 seconds of yes. You know, so it's we're going to deliver some yes down the road. And then if we're missing something, I'm sure people will let us know, but at least we put it out there. It's not hidden or not known because nobody's talking about it. I agree with you. I guess that's a long way to say it, but it's operationalized now. We have I'm a big person in production quality, because if you can't hear it, you might as well not even do it. And that's from our old band days and other stuff. It's like, if you don't have good sound to start with, and you're not even, no one's going to engage. So we have good sound on the recording side. We've invested not hardly any money in here on these cameras. It's very inexpensive what we've done. But then also Jasmine's ability to grab audio and videotape you in the back of the room saying what you think about today's meeting and those types of things. But you also have the opportunity to get people that live in your districts to comment and come in and talk about this stuff, or to send you an email and you introduce it as a thought on behalf of your constituents. So that's just the public input side of it. They can call us or we call them, but you know, do the call in public input. We can do any of the above, but what we can't do is go knock on everybody's door and say, come to the meeting. So to your point, I think that's the best use of Jasmine's time, and I think we've identified that. And if you think of anything else, let me know, please. Yeah.
I mean, an easy first step we could do is allow comments on our Facebook page. We're going to get all sorts of people that say horrible things that are completely untrue, but
We do.
allow comments.
Oh yeah, yeah. There's comments on every post. There's
Usually I see just the link to a meeting and no option to leave comments on them, or
yeah. That's all. We're wide open. We can't. Yeah, we are wide open for comments. I
are
see
there
them.
comments available on the videos on YouTube?
I don't know. I have to look at that one. I'm
Okay.
not sure. There should be. I mean, I don't know if it was ever set not to do that, but usually the videos are run on our Facebook page. At least they were. I got to be honest. I'm not on Facebook anymore because it just disgusts me. But
One of the
that's
things
just
that
personal.
mostly frustrates me is when I sit in these meetings and I hear great things, and then I go home and I see online people are saying the exact opposite of what we're discussing at these meetings, and I think it's just not a failure, but or even a lack of effort. But I think we could reach out to people, like I said, to put things in a little bit easier, more digestible increments to them. Say, hey, this is something that we talked about at the county, instead of just the link to the meeting. Say, hey, this is one thing in particular that we discussed, that 5 minutes out of the meeting that people want to hear, and break that down into an actual post, rather than a video clip. A statement from the chairman,
Sure.
or a statement from, this is how we're trying to move forward regarding said issue.
I would agree, and I would say that look to what we did with Chad Miller as the start of that.
Yep. Good.
That was the very first time we did that, and it was engaged.
Good.
For better or for worse. And most of the time you don't hear when you're doing a good thing. Most time you just hear when, you know, your steak was undercooked, so to speak. But they didn't hear about it the 5 times it was fantastic. So in this case, at least we're getting the information out. How people react to it is, but having it not out has been a real problem.
Noting that you're a vegetarian, I would just say that steaks cannot be undercooked.
My tofu is always perfect. So anyway, moving on. So any other questions or thoughts? I know we got off a little bit off subject, but it is accurate to how we are going to approach these meetings overall. It's give and take, and it's like I keep saying, it's a marathon. Some things we may need to sprint to, like earlier today, I'll use an example. Hopkins, someone from Hopkins Park came out and said sewage is flowing into the ditches because their pumps are down for their wastewater plant. And so they were going to ask for some money here. And I said, well, that's the type of thing that committee would say, this needs to go right to finance, or right to the executive committee to bless, and it'll be on the agenda for finance if that's something we want to do, because that's timely. That's an emergency that we need to decide, is this a proper use of ARPA funds? We could say it's 80-20. We'll put in 80%. Village of Hopkins Park should do the other 20 because they got 70 grand also. But you see where I'm going with this? But we need to make that decision as a board. It can't be just me winging it, and then, it can't be just, here's 100 grand, go fix whatever. We need receipts, we need bids, that kind of stuff. So is there anything else? All right, well, I guess at this point, so I need a motion from someone to adopt these initial 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which are all the same for all committees.
So moved.
So moved on that, as I read them before, Mr. Hunter with a second. And again, we'll add more. We'll work on this, as time goes on. But this is just so we can get the ball rolling and have the executive committee say, yes, we agree. And then the full board say, yes, we agree with these types of, the ground rules, if you will. So, all righty. I guess that could be a roll call vote then, if there's other comments. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. All right, great. So that was the adoption of the policy. And again, these agendas will be very similar. We won't have, when we have a request, we'll put it on there. We may require forms, like if we're a grantor, we may, Dun & Bradstreet, GATA certified, have you ever had a grant had to be repaid because of X, Y, and Z? You know what I mean? The thing, to make sure that everything is on the up and up, how many years you've been in business, what's your goals, that kind of stuff. We may get a request that says, hey, this is like part of another big thing that we're working on. Maybe they should be a sub-grantee of something, and we put out an RFQ for someone to manage an entire program continuum for us, like with workforce. That's what the workforce board does. They put out these, these RFQs and RFPs for different programs, or it's a grant situation where they got to write a narrative towards. But it just can't be, hey, I want 50 grand to go start a program to help out kids who were impacted by COVID, with no other whatever. It's got to be solid and with deliverables and outcomes. So, the other thing is we won't adjourn meetings if we haven't voted on something. We can recess them. It helps us if we don't have a quorum, but we want to continue the move. So here we can actually have a motion to adjourn if we wanted to. We could adjourn this meeting. So but if you want to stay, we can stay. Motion to adjourn?
I'll second that.
There a second?
Yep.
Okay, all those in favor?
Chairman, before you adjourn,
Yes, sir.
say something.
Can't do that.
Thank you.
Hold on, let me get your mic on, Antonio.
Thank you. I've been looking into it. I think everything that all the board members already addressed is very important, infrastructure and everything else. And you already know my position when it comes to some of those subjects that we covered, and I have private meetings with you and other things too. I was looking over some of the statistics from 2020, 2021, deaths by gender, and so on and so forth. And I've been thinking here that I really like to see, in addition to everything else that was addressed here today, for this community to also evaluate and support some programs related to restore and maintain the health and well-being of the citizens of Kankakee, because of the Kankakee County. Because the way I'm looking at it here, I think if we had the residents of the county with a little bit of an improvement in terms of health, we could have probably avoided some of the fatalities that we had in the beginning before the vaccine was available. And we're talking about a lot of the underlying conditions. We know that we had a lot of connection with underlying conditions with the beginning of 2020 with the deaths due to COVID. So I think if we can actually find or evaluate and maybe support some programs that will come up to us here, that will be more associated to how can we improve the overall health and well-being of the citizens in case this comes back. You know, in case we get another surge of whatever COVID variant or any other condition that could be an issue here. You know, we're talking about different things. Diabetes type 2 is one of the cases here. There's so many studies out there that already prove that if you target lifestyle, it can really help people with diabetes type 2. You know, there are high blood pressure. There's been already a lot of studies from National Institute of Health that also have been proven that lifestyle is important when it comes to support those things and reverse some of those conditions. So I hope that some of those programs or people that may be watching this or other organizations can put together something and then bring it up to us so we can sit down and evaluate and see if it's something we can actually support.
I think it's an important part of the big picture. I agree with you, absolutely. It's just maybe at some point it's maybe an and we should probably involve everybody, whether it's on the traditional medicine side,
Sure.
holistic side, you know, really the whole big picture of how to address this across cultures, because there's different aspects that are more prevalent in certain different cultures, and that's just by the data. So we can target those responses to different areas. I would say it's a very valid way to do it. And again, that's more blue sky. Like, have we done this before? You know, have we connected all these dots? We've tried, but has anyone been truly successful getting hospitals, health department, not-for-profits all pointed in the same direction? And I think, just my own opinion, when you have the kind of funding we're talking about, maybe that might encourage people into the right direction. I'm just going to mention that out loud.
I agree,
Because it's
100%.
true.
You know, there's so many different things that happened during the beginning of 2020, and with COVID and everything else, we saw an increase of, we've been seeing the increase of drug addiction throughout the years, and it was a little bit more, you know, we're talking about STD, an increase, and a few other things that was an increase during that time. It just so many different things that can be linked with how healthy those individuals should have been,
Yeah.
or actually they went backwards instead of going forward.
I would agree, and a good way to kind of, you know, tie that up, I think maybe is, do you guys know that we were the first to sue in Illinois, the first county to sue Purdue Pharma over OxyContin? We were the first.
Okay.
Way back when. And there were other counties who came on board in the class action after that, but we were number one to sign on. So the litigation has moved to a point where they've agreed on a settlement from the family with Purdue Pharma. It's still working on the final, you know, status of it, but I have a feeling it's in the documentation, which is written by lawyers, so it's not English. So it's as you start reading through it, it looks like they're going to give the states money, much like the tobacco money, and we could use those for programs here locally based on need. Now, I hope that need is not determined by how many people live in your county, but by the impact per capita, because we're at the top of that list, or close to it still, of opioids within Kankakee County. It's bad per capita. And so there's others that are up there with us, but I mean, that's not a stat that we should be proud of, obviously. But again, that may be money that lasts beyond the 3 years. And I pray that we know a disposition of that by that time period, because that would affect the health department, it would affect all our non-for-profits. But I have a feeling that money would come through the county as well.
Right.
So again, we need to have a little flexibility to talk about opioids and those types of situations on how it impacts workforce, businesses, you know, all the different things that you were just mentioning. But we almost have to kind of wait and see what happens with that a little bit to figure out how much we're going to dedicate towards it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It
Yeah,
does.
because we could fully fund something that they turn around and fund for us the next year. That would be not good. actually.
Well, at least if it's something new, you know, something that has not been done yet.
Yep, I got you.
Thank
Thank you for that. We had a motion and a second. I'm sorry, you have something else? Yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna piggyback on what you said. If we have a mentally healthy and a physically healthy, a holistically healthy community, we have a better workforce, we have better families, it's just, everything is better. So let's go Blue Sky Committee.
Yeah. It's gonna be fun. It could turn into a lot of work. You can't write checks with your mouth that your intellect will not be able to cash, and because you're gonna have to say, we want to do this. Well, then that means you volunteered to work on it. So I'm just saying, that's all of us, you know, I'm all in on this. So with that, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor of adjournment, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign.